Have you ever wondered why the same relationship pain keeps showing up like a song on repeat, playing the exact same notes with different voices? What if there was a psychological map that could actually forecast when and how the next heartbreak would happen? This is exactly what How Attachment Theory Can Predict Your Next Heartbreak reveals. Understanding this framework could be the difference between stumbling blindly into the same painful ending and finally seeing the pattern clearly enough to change it. Here's what makes this prediction possible. Attachment theory isn't fortune-telling or guesswork. It's based on decades of research showing that the patterns formed in early childhood with caregivers directly shape how adult relationships unfold. Think of it like this. Every person carries an invisible relationship blueprint created before they could even speak. That blueprint contains instructions for how to handle closeness, how to respond to conflict, how to deal with vulnerability, and even how to cope when things fall apart. Most people never look at their blueprint. They just follow it automatically, relationship after relationship, wondering why the same story keeps playing out. But once that blueprint becomes visible, the predictions become startlingly accurate, and that's both unsettling and empowering. The four main attachment styles each come with their own predictable relationship trajectory. Secure attachment looks like comfort with both intimacy and independence. These individuals generally experience higher relationship satisfaction, better communication, and more stable long-term partnerships. When conflicts arise, secure people use constructive strategies. They talk things through, repair after fights, and stay in mutually supportive relationships. Their breakups, when they happen, tend to hurt, but get processed in healthier ways. They feel the pain, seek support, reflect on what happened, and eventually return to dating with realistic but hopeful expectations. The secure pattern predicts relationship success more often than heartbreak. But here's where things get more complicated. Anxious attachment shows up as intense fear of abandonment, constant need for reassurance, and hypervigilance to any sign of rejection. Research consistently links anxious attachment to specific relationship patterns, more jealousy and clinginess, conflict that escalates quickly, relationship satisfaction that fluctuates wildly depending on how much attention and reassurance is flowing, stronger emotional dependence on the relationship itself. And here's the prediction part. Anxious individuals tend to choose emotionally unavailable partners. They over-pursue avoidant partners until those partners pull away. They experience higher immediate distress during breakups, more rumination about the ex, and greater difficulty letting go. The pattern is so consistent that researchers can almost predict the trajectory. The anxious person will feel the breakup intensely, check social media obsessively, make repeated attempts to reconnect, and often jump back into similar relationships to soothe old wounds. The next heartbreak becomes predictable because the same script keeps running. But there's another style that predicts heartbreak in a completely different way. Avoidant attachment appears as discomfort with closeness, high value placed on independence, and tendency toward emotional distance. Meta-analyses show that attachment avoidance actually has a stronger negative correlation with relationship satisfaction than anxiety does. Think about what that means. Avoidant patterns predict relationship problems even more reliably than anxious patterns. The trajectory looks like this. The avoidant person starts engaged and interested. As intimacy increases, they begin creating distance. The partner feels rejected and starts protesting or pursuing. The avoidant person feels smothered and withdraws further. The relationship deteriorates or ends. And here's what makes this pattern particularly painful for partners. In the short term after a breakup, avoidant individuals often feel less distress. They lean on emotional numbing and deactivation strategies. They act fine or unbothered. But longitudinal research reveals something fascinating. Over the medium to long term, avoidant people can experience higher depressive symptoms, especially when they avoid healthy processing and integration of the loss. The predicted pattern becomes clear. Act fine immediately after the breakup, experience delayed grief, leave feelings unresolved, and repeat the same emotionally distant dynamic in the next relationship. The heartbreak gets predicted not by intensity of immediate pain, but by the pattern of avoiding emotional processing altogether. Then there's fearful or disorganized attachment, which mixes high anxiety with high avoidance. These individuals want closeness desperately, but fear it simultaneously. This internal contradiction predicts unstable, on and off, highly tumultuous relationships. Breakup cycles that repeat. One day pursuing connection intensely, the next day pushing it away completely. Partners in relationships with fearful avoidant individuals often describe feeling whiplashed, never knowing which version of the person they'll encounter. The prediction here is almost tragically consistent. Relationships will be characterized by chaos and confusion. Breakups will happen multiple times with the same person. The emotional intensity will be overwhelming, and without significant intervention, the pattern will continue indefinitely. 4 attachment styles, 4 different but equally predictable paths to heartbreak, which raises an obvious question. If attachment styles predict heartbreak so accurately, what happens when different styles pair together? Here's where the predictions become even more precise. Secure paired with insecure can work, but research shows the secure person can become drained over time if the insecure partner's patterns don't change. The secure person's stability can buffer some issues initially, but eventually the constant emotional labor takes a toll. Anxious paired with anxious creates a relationship characterized by mutual reassurance seeking, which can work if both people have high tolerance for emotional intensity. But it can also spiral into mutual anxiety amplification. Avoidant paired with avoidant typically results in minimal conflict, but also minimal intimacy. Both people keep emotional distance, which feels comfortable but ultimately unfulfilling. And then there's the pairing that almost guarantees heartbreak. Anxious paired with avoidant creates what researchers call the push-pull dynamic. This pairing is so reliably painful that it's become the most studied relationship combination in attachment research. Here's how the prediction unfolds. The anxious person seeks closeness and reassurance. The avoidant person interprets this as pressure and withdraws. The withdrawal terrifies the anxious person, who pursues harder. The pursuit makes the avoidant person feel suffocated, so they distance further. Round and round it goes, each person's coping strategy triggering the other person's core wound. The anxious person's fear of abandonment gets confirmed by the avoidant person's withdrawal. The avoidant person's fear of engulfment gets confirmed by the anxious person's pursuit. Both people are essentially proving each other's worst beliefs about relationships. And the heartbreak becomes almost mathematically predictable. Unless both people gain significant insight and actively change their coping strategies, the relationship will end painfully. The anxious person will feel devastated, abandoned, and confused. The avoidant person will feel relieved initially, but may experience delayed grief later. And both will likely repeat the pattern with new partners unless something interrupts the cycle. This is the prediction attachment theory offers. Not that heartbreak is guaranteed, but that without awareness and intervention, the same patterns will keep producing the same outcomes. Now, here's where modern dating culture throws gasoline on these attachment patterns. Dating apps have created an environment that amplifies insecure attachment in predictable ways. Think about the mechanics: fast swiping, ghosting, low accountability, and abundant choice. For anxious individuals, this environment is a nightmare. Every delayed response, every match that goes silent, every ambiguous interaction triggers the attachment system. Research shows that anxious attachment is linked to higher use of dating apps for reassurance and attention, but also to lower romantic confidence and more fear of rejection. The prediction becomes clear. Anxious people will hyper-focus on response times, read receipts, and mixed signals. They'll interpret silence as rejection. They'll pursue matches who seem emotionally unavailable because those matches feel familiar. And they'll experience repeated cycles of getting their hopes up and then being ghosted or breadcrumbed. The app environment almost guarantees the anxious pattern will be triggered constantly. For avoidant individuals, dating apps serve a different but equally problematic function. The endless options mean that whenever a connection starts feeling too intimate or demanding, there's always another match waiting. Avoidant people can use apps to keep partners at emotional arm's length. Lots of chatting, minimal commitment, connections that remain shallow or short-lived. The prediction here is that avoidant users will struggle to develop deeper relationships because the app environment makes it too easy to replace someone when things get emotionally uncomfortable. They'll move from match to match, never quite letting anyone in, wondering why relationships feel unsatisfying but never recognizing their own pattern of keeping distance. And when anxious and avoidant people meet on apps, which happens with remarkable frequency, the stage is set for predictable heartbreak. The anxious person sees the avoidant person's profile, independent, confident, successful, and feels attracted. The avoidant person sees the anxious person's warmth and emotional availability and feels initially interested. They match, start talking, maybe go on dates. Things feel promising, but as soon as real intimacy becomes a possibility, the old patterns activate. The anxious person starts seeking more connection. The avoidant person starts creating space. And the cycle that research has documented thousands of times begins playing out in yet another relationship. The heartbreak can be predicted almost from the moment they match. Social media communities have become fascinating observational laboratories for these patterns. On Reddit, particularly in forums focused on attachment theory, heartbreak, and dating, the same stories appear over and over with only minor variations. Anxious partners devastated after avoidant partners pull away or leave suddenly when things get serious. Posts describing the moment someone read about anxious-avoidant dynamics and recognized their entire relationship in the literature. Threads from fearful avoidant individuals expressing regret over breakups once they understand how their own deactivation and confusion pushed loving partners away. There's also frequent discussion of something called negative sentiment override. This is when avoidant partners quietly accumulate resentment without expressing it, then suddenly detach and end the relationship. The other person gets blindsided. They had no idea anything was wrong. But the avoidant partner had been emotionally checked out for weeks or months, just never communicated it. The prediction here is tragically consistent. The relationship will end abruptly from the anxious partner's perspective, but not from the avoidant partner's. The avoidant person had been planning the exit for a while. They just never said anything. This pattern shows up in hundreds of Reddit posts, almost word for word. TikTok and Instagram have turned attachment theory into viral content. Short videos explaining why anxious people do certain things after breakups while avoidant people do completely different things. POV skits showing anxious partners overanalyzing texts versus avoidant partners emotionally checking out. Explainer videos about why certain people always date avoidance or why avoidant exes seem completely fine after leaving. The content resonates because it names experiences that felt confusing and personal, but are actually part of predictable patterns. However, there's also criticism. Some psychologists worry that attachment theory is being oversimplified into relationship astrology. Labels get used to justify bad behavior rather than as starting points for change. Someone says, That's just my avoidant attachment, as if it's an unchangeable personality trait rather than a learned pattern that can be modified. The prediction angle can become fatalistic. I'm anxious, so relationships will always hurt, or they're avoidant, so they'll never change. This misuse of the framework actually predicts more heartbreak because it prevents people from doing the work that could shift their patterns. But there are also success stories circulating online. People sharing how working on their attachment style through therapy, self-work, and boundary setting led to healthier relationships and less catastrophic breakups. Stories of anxious-avoidant couples who improved once both recognized and owned their patterns. These narratives suggest that while attachment theory can predict heartbreak, it can also predict healing and growth when used correctly. The question becomes whether the information increases awareness and motivation for change, or whether it becomes another way to feel helpless and stuck. And that distinction determines whether the prediction becomes self-fulfilling or gets interrupted by conscious intervention. Here's what the research reveals about predicting specific outcomes. Studies can predict relationship satisfaction with impressive accuracy based on attachment styles. Both anxiety and avoidance negatively predict satisfaction, with avoidance showing the stronger link. Newer longitudinal studies show that the negative impact of insecure attachment tends to grow over time in long-term relationships. What starts as minor issues become major problems. The prediction isn't just about whether relationships will work, it's about the trajectory over months and years. Insecure attachment predicts declining satisfaction, increasing conflict, and higher risk of breakup. Research can also predict breakup distress with remarkable precision. Higher attachment anxiety predicts more immediate breakup distress through rumination, self-punishment, and emotion-focused coping. Higher attachment avoidance predicts lower short-term distress, but higher long-term depressive symptoms when healthy coping and emotional processing are avoided. Even the timeline of suffering can be predicted based on attachment style. Anxious individuals hurt intensely right away. Avoidant individuals hurt later, often when they're alone and can't distract themselves anymore. Perhaps most importantly, research can predict post-breakup growth versus stagnation. Secure individuals are more likely to show personal growth after breakups. They use the experience to refine partner choice and boundaries. They integrate lessons and move forward. Anxious individuals risk getting stuck in obsessive loops, idealizing the ex and jumping back into similar relationships without processing what happened. Avoidant individuals risk moving on by numbing out, not integrating lessons, and recreating the same distant dynamics with the next partner. The prediction extends beyond the current relationship to the next one. Attachment patterns forecast not just how this relationship will end, but how the next one will begin and likely proceed. The same script, different actors, same predicted outcome, unless something changes. Which brings up the most important question of all. Can the prediction be changed? The answer is yes, but it requires specific actions. Attachment patterns aren't genetic destiny. They're learned responses that can be unlearned and replaced with healthier ones. Research on earned secure attachment shows that people can move from insecure to secure through therapy, conscious practice, and new relational experiences. The key is developing awareness of patterns, understanding where they came from, and actively building new ways of relating. For anxious individuals, this means learning to self-soothe instead of constantly seeking external reassurance. Building tolerance for uncertainty and discomfort without immediately seeking relief through a partner. Recognizing that intense chemistry might be activation of old wounds rather than genuine compatibility. Choosing partners based on their actual behavior and consistency rather than potential or intermittent reinforcement. These changes don't happen overnight, but they do happen, and when they do, the predictions shift. An anxious person who develops more security doesn't experience breakups the same way. The rumination decreases, the obsessive checking stops, the ability to move forward improves. The next relationship has a different trajectory because the internal patterns have changed. For avoidant individuals, the work involves gradually increasing comfort with vulnerability and emotional expression, learning that intimacy doesn't always lead to engulfment, practicing staying present during emotional conversations instead of shutting down or leaving, choosing partners who respect boundaries while also gently inviting connection, recognizing when deactivation strategies are kicking in and choosing to stay engaged anyway. This is deeply uncomfortable work for avoidant people because it requires doing the very things their nervous system learned to avoid. But research shows it's possible. Avoidant individuals who engage in attachment-focused therapy often shift toward more secure patterns over time, and when they do, the predicted heartbreak changes. Relationships last longer, feel more satisfying, and end less abruptly if they end at all. The pattern gets rewritten through repeated experiences of vulnerability that don't lead to the feared outcomes. For fearful avoidant individuals, the work is perhaps most complex because it involves managing both high anxiety and high avoidance simultaneously. Therapy is almost essential here because the internal contradictions are so intense, but change is still possible. Learning to recognize when the push-pull dynamic is happening and choosing to stay steady instead. Building capacity to tolerate both closeness and independence without swinging to extremes. Developing trust that partners can handle their complexity without leaving. This work takes time and often requires professional support, but the prediction can shift. Relationships become less chaotic, less characterized by constant breakups and reconciliations, more stable and secure over time. So here's what this all means for anyone watching this and recognizing their own patterns. First, understand that attachment theory's predictions aren't fixed pronouncements. They're probabilities based on current patterns. Those patterns can change. Second, recognize that awareness is the crucial first step. Most people repeat attachment patterns unconsciously. Simply seeing the pattern clearly already begins to interrupt it. Third, use the framework to inform choices going forward. If anxious-avoidant pairings have consistently created suffering, perhaps it's time to try something different. If secure people have always seemed boring, maybe that boredom is worth investigating rather than dismissing. Fourth, consider professional support for deeper work. Attachment-focused therapy accelerates change in ways self-help cannot match. Fifth, practice new behaviors even when they feel uncomfortable. Anxious people practicing less pursuit, avoidant people practicing more vulnerability, fearful people practicing staying steady. Each repetition builds new neural pathways. Sixth, choose partners who support growth rather than reinforcing old patterns. Secure partners help insecure people become more secure. Insecure partners tend to make each other more insecure. The prediction changes based on who gets chosen as a partner. Seventh, be patient with the process. Attachment patterns took years to form. They won't shift overnight. There will be setbacks, moments of falling back into old patterns. That's normal and expected. What matters is the overall trajectory. Eighth, remember that changing attachment patterns isn't just about preventing heartbreak. It's about building capacity for genuine intimacy, connection, and fulfillment. The goal isn't just avoiding pain. It's creating relationships that actually feel good most of the time. The emotional truth beneath all of this is both sobering and hopeful. Attachment theory can predict heartbreak with remarkable accuracy. The patterns are that consistent. An anxious person will likely suffer intensely after breakups, struggle to let go, and repeat similar dynamics with new partners. An avoidant person will likely create distance when things get intimate, end relationships abruptly, and avoid processing emotions. Anxious-avoidant pairings will almost certainly result in the push-pull dynamic that leaves both people hurt and confused. These predictions are supported by decades of research and thousands of documented cases. But here's the hopeful part. Predictions based on current patterns can be changed by changing the patterns themselves. The relationship script that's been running automatically can be rewritten through awareness, practice, and new experiences. The heartbreak that seemed inevitable can be avoided by making different choices, different partners, different responses to triggers, different coping strategies when things get difficult. This isn't about achieving perfect relationships or becoming perfectly secure. It's about recognizing that the patterns bringing someone to this moment don't have to determine the next moment. It's about understanding that attachment styles explain the past and present, but don't have to dictate the future. It's about believing that change is possible even when patterns feel deeply ingrained. The prediction attachment theory offers isn't a life sentence. It's a warning and an opportunity, a warning that without intervention, the same outcomes will keep occurring, and an opportunity to interrupt those outcomes by doing something different. The next heartbreak doesn't have to follow the same script as the last one. The next relationship doesn't have to end the same way the previous ones did. But that requires seeing the pattern clearly, understanding where it came from, and actively choosing to build something new. The prediction can be changed. The question is whether someone is ready to do the work that changes it. Because the information is there, the research exists, the framework is available. What happens next depends entirely on whether that knowledge gets used to repeat familiar patterns or to create genuinely different outcomes. And for anyone ready to break the cycle, that possibility alone might be the most important prediction of all.
Thank you for watching. If you want to learn how to better understand avoidance, relationships, and psychological biases, then subscribe to our channel. Because you deserve beautiful relationships.